Okay.
All right, let's start out with number 1. This one comes from Lisa. She posted on our Instagram, and she is coached by Allie. And she says, when you're a fondo/recreational cyclist who's not racing but still wants to get faster, and you live in a year-round cycling climate like California, can you move your off-season to when it suits you instead of the traditional winter?
Yeah, Lisa, so we reached out to Coach Allie to answer this for you because she knows you best. And here's what Allie said. It's dependent on when you want to race, ! If your A race or fondo is early, like March, then a break should come sooner than September, and then you would head into the weight room in October. And then on the other hand, if your A race or fondo is later, like July and August, then you have a little bit more freedom to play around with in riding, and you can a break before you head into the real structured part of the training. Weight training can start around November, and then you head into base during the springtime. It's really all about figuring your goals, your goal races, putting them on your schedule, and then working backwards for a proper annual periodization. And Lisa, go back and listen to our Timing is Everything podcast. We'll put that in the show notes, but that's also where we talk about setting up your season by choosing your A, B, and C races.
All right. On to number 2, and this comes from Chris Lawson. He is coached by Coach Jake, and he asks, should masters athletes be doing fasted rides? Are they beneficial for weight loss?
Okay, Chris is coached by Jake. Coach Jake answered the question because he knows you better than we do, and he says, I don't believe athletes should do fasted rides. I just find proper nutrition and diet, not dieting, is the best way to lose weight. The best time to do this is during the fall or the winter when the training volume is lower. That's what we've been saying for ever since the podcast started. You really want to lose weight in the off season. Once you get into the season, the time to lose weight has passed. Jay goes on to say, this way you're not starving your body while you are training hard. Food is fuel for your workouts. And then Jay goes on to say, while the research is mixed, there's a handful of studies that point to there being a small benefit to fasted rides in training for your body to use fat as opposed to carbohydrates for fuel during aerobic activity. This can be a huge benefit for endurance athletes, as burning fat during lower periods of intensity can save carbohydrates for when the intensity ramps up. If you plan to do a fasted ride, keep them to strictly into zone 2 for 60 to 90 minutes max.
Coach Jake actually reached out to me this one. I would also add that female athletes should be very cautious because our hormones are different and it's an extra stress on our body. So like, you're not going to get the most out of your training if you're training fasted. That's just kind of how it is. On to number 3, and this one comes from Alex Indy. He is coached by Coach Isaiah, and he says, hi, I'm fortunate enough to have a power meter on my mountain bike and my road bike. When Coach Isaiah prescribes me Amex TSS workouts, I notice it's easier to hit the minimum TSS on the road than on the trails. Why would this be? Is it because mountain biking involves more of the upper body, which wouldn't be accounted for in TSS, or because there are more descents where I'm not pedaling?
Okay, Alex is also a one-on-one coach athlete by Coach Isaiah, and Isaiah goes on to say, you nailed both of the factors here, as it is indeed most often harder to achieve a TSS target on the trails. A power meter is not able to account for the full body effect that mountain biking can bring. Technical trails that require more coasting and ratcheting of the cranks as a result result in less power and consequently less accumulating TSS. And Alex, I'll go on to say that when PowerTap introduced the first mountain bike hub power meter back in 2005, we thought TSSs were going to be through the roof just because you go really hard in mountain biking, and we actually found out the contrary. And we were like, WTF, why? So we did a study. We went out and chose a 10-minute climb and did a 10-minute climb at 160 beats per minute with the same rider, one on the road bike and one on the mountain bike. And the mountain bike power, its same heart rate, came back 20 watts less. And when we analyzed the power, the reason why is because if you think about it on the road, it's just 100% constant pedaling. Mm-hmm. Whereas on mountain bike, it's like pedal, and then you ease off the cranks to get over a little technical section. And then what that results is in a lot of time spent not pedaling, and that's what accounted for the 20 watts lower. And then since TSS is calculated based on your average power output, you're going to see lower TSSs for mountain bike, even though the effort may even feel harder. It's just that mountain bike power tends to be less. And when we have also noted in the podcast in previous episodes about gravel watts, the same thing is true when you're climbing a really loose, chunky gravel climb. It's just completely different from the road, where it's just great traction and you're pedaling 100% of the time.
And you're not having to focus on like getting around things that distract you.
Yeah, and then the final part of that about this, Alex, is when we prescribe a lot of tempo and sweet spot and threshold bursts, we're doing so to mimic the power demands of mountain biking. And that's really it. So you pedal a little bit, but then you see these big giant spikes in your power to get over a rock or a log or a just a feature, versus road power can be nice and steady, plateau shaped.
That's a good question. All right, moving on to number 4. This comes from Dave Tuitt. He sent this via email, and he is coached by Coach Jake. He says, I've always been diligent about rest days and typically do the recommended recovery day activities along with an occasional massage. I recently completed a heavy 3-day block and found that just sleeping in a little longer and keeping my feet up was a gift. But even with that, I was still tired at the end of the day. So my question is, in your experience, is there a best recovery after a heavy block? AKA do nothing, do a 1-hour active recovery ride, do one of the rest day recommendations, get a massage, or use a Normatec. What's your advice?
So we reach out to Coach Jake for this answer, Dave, since he is coaching you. And Jake says, first, I believe everyone is different and you need to find what works best for you. Secondly, with that said, you want to find what works for you consistently and stick with it. Massage is an excellent form of recovery, but for a lot of athletes, it's expensive, it's not readily available, and athletes tend to be inconsistent with it. Jay goes on to say that his personal experience with massage is that they made his legs feel worse because he got them sporadically. My muscles were not used to that form of recovery. And he goes on to say something such as the Normatecs work really well because you can use them every day and you can take them with you when you travel. And we got a lot of questions on the gram about how often you can use Normatecs, and it's like every day. Yeah. You can use them twice a day.
I use them very often. Although the massage gun, because I don't use it as often, does make me sore. And so I do those when I have like 2 days off.
Yeah, and so Jake goes on to say active recovery rides can be great as well. When I raced pro, I absolutely loved them, and I felt so much better on the days after an easy ride compared to a day off. However, moving into a career and a family, I found that having a complete day off without the stress of finding time to ride more beneficial. This also came along with the opportunity to nap or sleep. The extra sleep always helps, and when I was racing full-time, I could do both, but now that is not an option. Jay goes on to say yoga and proper stretching routine that takes 15 minutes can also be a great use of time. You can plan this into your training, but again, to make it more beneficial, it needs to be consistent and not sporadic. And then anything you introduce new can be hard at first. Just doing the simple things like planning your meals, grocery shop Sunday, meal prep Monday, so that you have food waiting for you after your workouts, so that you're feeling right, can help a ton, as well as going to bed early so you get 8 hours of sleep, staying hydrated throughout the day. Proper fueling on the bike help out a lot.
All right. On to number 5, and this comes from Andrew Leakin. He's a former one-on-one coached FasCat athlete, and he is a cyclocrosser. And he asks, if you happen to not FTFP and miss one of the planned workouts, is it better to try and make up for the lost TSS by adding more to the next planned workout, or just stick to the next planned workout and ultimately cry on the battlefield for not FTFPing?
All right. Well, thank you for your question, Andrew. And before I answer, I just want to introduce you to our pet cheetah. We forgot to introduce him at the beginning of the podcast. He doesn't have a name. We don't even know if it's a he. Could be a she. So we're taking suggestions.
Maybe we let Allie choose the best suggestion in the Instagram Live comments.
Now, I think he might be a Larry. Lacey thinks he might be a Chester.
Doesn't really cool. Look at him.
But anyway,
he's majestic.
Yeah, but Andrew, you being an advertising guy, maybe you can think of something clever for us to call our cheetah here. But so to answer your question, and I can answer it this way, listeners, because I know Andrew, so I'm gonna give him a little bit of a hard time. So Andrew, I think the right answer for you is identifying the root cause of why you missed a workout. Knowing that you have a demanding job and a young child, figuring out how to balance your training with work and your family is the key. The other answer is that it depends on which workout you missed. So missing a Tuesday, Wednesday workout has a greater effect than missing like an endurance ride that we prescribe the day before your rest days. A lot of times with a fatigue-dependent training plan design model, you'll find an endurance ride like on a Thursday or a Sunday versus the harder power-based workouts on Saturdays and Tuesday and or Wednesday. So missing a Tuesday, Wednesday has a greater effect than missing like a Thursday, for example. But every workout is important. Every day you get faster. So you want to try to not get in the habit of missing workouts. But I hope that answer kind of helped you out a lot. Check out our fatigue-dependent training plan design tip and podcast for more information about that. And Andrew, I always expect you to cry in the dojo.
All right, moving on to number 6, and this one comes from Greg Lyons. He is also a former FasCat athlete, and he's training for Leadville, and he lives in Texas. And he says, I live at sea level, but soon we'll be spending a month up in Colorado at altitude, at around 8,500 feet. My question is, what is the best way to stick to a plan in regards to targets based on FTP? My established FTP at sea level, would I just adjust it based on Joe Frill's blog post from 2010 on altitude and performance, which might be outdated, or should I use another method to adjust? Or should I do an FTP test once I get to my destination and use that to follow the plan?
Yeah, great to hear from you, Greg. And knowing that you're probably up in Winter Park right now, elevation 9,000 feet, and then you're competing in Leadville. So here's the deal. This research was actually done by the late Dr. Ed Burt in Lewis Passfield, and then another researcher, Bassett. And they compared world hour records in 1999, published a paper in the Medicine, Science, and Sports Exercise Journal. And this was in relation to the Olympics that were held in Mexico at altitude, I think it was like 6,700 feet. So there was a lot of research out there, but the nuts and the bolts of it is in their study. And then there's also a French physiologist that also backed up their results. It's expect a 1% reduction in your power output for every 1,000 feet that you go up. So 9,000 feet, 9%, unfortunately. Now, for everyone that lives at altitude and they go down to sea level, then expect a 1% increase in power output for every 1,000 feet you go down. That's why so many athletes live and train at altitude, because there is a performance benefit when they go to compete at sea level. So what I would do, Greg, and this is what I do with athletes, you don't need to do a field test or anything like that. I just use their work and reduce your FTP by 1%. So in your case, I would reduce your FTP by 9% and just call it good at altitude. And then your TSSs are accurate, and then your zone-based training is accurate. Watch our video on altitude training benefits for cyclists that Jackson and I recorded. And then we also have a training tip from Coach Jake, the effect of racing at altitude.
Yeah, when you go back down to sea level, I've done it. I felt superhuman. It was great.
Yeah, you feel like King Kong. It's great. Yeah.
All right, number 7 comes from James Stevens. He posted in our athlete forum, and he is on our coaching subscription. I actually just talked to him this month. And he asks, this summer/spring, I've done a fair amount of physical labor around the house. Specifically, we've had 15 tons of landscape rock. Oof, that's a lot. I shoveled, as well as some other projects where I had to move dirt. I know this took a lot out of me, so I was wondering, should work of this kind be factored into my TSS? Similarly, should TSS be accounted for the Recovery Foundation's day's workout?
So, James, TSS is a direct measurement of the work that makes you faster. It is the positive physiological adaptations, and it does not include the non-aerobic physical work, the stuff that doesn't make you faster as a cyclist. Therefore, yard work, snow shoveling, walking, picking up the baby should not be factored in because those are not positive physiological adaptations, as the original researchers in the impulse response model found out. Now, there's an expression called in performance model and just data analytics in general, it's garbage in equals garbage out. And so don't be modifying your TSSs on account that you did something physical, because unless that activity was aerobic or anaerobic and it was cycling or another like swimming, running, it doesn't make you faster. So the final thought I have on that, if you care enough, just hire a neighborhood kid to do all that work for you, or do that work in the off season when you get past your A races. So many cyclists know you do all your home improvement projects in the fall, and then you do not do anything in the spring and summer in and around your A race. And if that's just the way life presents it, get someone to do it for you.
Yeah, he's kind of, when I talked to him, he's in like a slower part of the season, and he just did Fogo gravel and did great. So clearly he's a strong cyclist. So just got to focus on the big races and keep that in mind. Number 8 comes from, I hope I'm saying this right, Alex Okalish. He emailed us, and he is from California, and he's on our Winning in the Kitchen intro meal plan as well as our off-season plan. And he says, I have 2 young kids and a wife. How should I modify my training if the Sunday ride is too long to fit in? I'm following the intermediate plans and could do longer rides on Sunday or even add in some training on Monday. Or is it better to just get an indoor trainer and try to ride Sunday evening?
Yeah, great question, Alex. And in general, the Sunday rides are shorter and they're easier than the Saturday rides, and that's on purpose. If you're looking for a custom solution, that's when hiring a coach would be a very good person to lean on for that custom schedule and also creative training plan design. I wonder if your situation would call for like a shorter 1-hour indoor friendly workout on Sundays that you could do in the morning before the family got up, or you mentioned in the evening, although evening workouts usually don't go as well, or like even during the nap, like when the kids nap. But you mentioned Monday. I always tell athletes, honor the rest day on Monday. Don't take training that you missed on Sunday and try to make up for it on Monday, because then you still are going to want to FTFP on Tuesday, and then if you've worked out on Monday and Sunday, you just missed a rest day, and you're kind of punting your recovery down the week, and that never works out. But I would try a shorter, structured 1-hour indoor friendly workout on Sunday morning, perhaps.
Yeah. It always feels good to get those early morning workouts in to get you in a better mood for the rest of the day. All right, number 9 comes from Tyler Goodyear. He posts in our athlete forum, and he is a coaching subscription athlete. He says, I recently got access to an infrared sauna. How could I use this to benefit my training?
So Tyler, when done properly, infrared sauna can increase your red blood cell production. That's increase your hematocrit. That's what delivers more oxygen to your muscles and just increases your power output. It happens by way of erythropoiesis, if I'm pronouncing that right.
That's right.
That's just the physiological mechanism. Now, in order to get that adaptation, it's very complicated. It's very difficult to get right. It's time consuming. You have to ask yourself, is it even worth it? You can also use an infrared sauna to train for the heat or even altitude. And Dr. Stacy Sims, who authored Roar, has put a pretty good infrared sauna protocol in her book. It's actually on page 209, and I checked it out before we podcasted about it. But also, one thing, if you have a commercial infrared sauna, you got to make sure it's at the proper temperature to stimulate physiological adaptations, which is 165 degrees. So like a lot of commercial saunas, they'll be lower, and you're just not going to get a benefit from that. So Jeff, most of them will have a temperature gauge in the inside. Just make sure it's at 165. Obviously not hotter, but you won't get an adaptation or near as good at like 120 or 130, even though that's hot. So anyway, Dr. Stacy Sims goes on to say, you're looking to create a small amount of heat stress and a small amount of dehydration. With dehydration, there's a decrease in blood volume, and the heat from the sauna signals to the body to send more blood to the surface of your skin for cooling. And then there's a decrease in blood flow to the organs, and the kidneys say, holy cow, we need more red blood cells, and they'll stimulate the production, or the EPO, erythropoietin, which is erythropoiesis, and that's to increase plasma volume. So that's kind of the process. So you got to add the heat stress, the dehydration, and sit there for about 25 to 30 minutes after you exercise. So it's a long process. I've tried it, and it's almost more trouble than it's worth, and I don't even know if I got a little bump in my hematocrit. I will say, after Tom Pidcock won the Olympic golds in Tokyo, that was earlier this week, he did say that he sat in he called it a heat tent. Not sure what he was talking about that, but he was saying that he had set up a temperature-controlled heat tent in his spare room to simulate the conditions in Tokyo. He says, I've been doing a lot of heat work, which I'm happy to tell everyone now, but before I didn't want to advertise it in case someone downplays the heat. Basically, it was hot AF in Tokyo, and Tom was prepared. Maybe some of the other athletes weren't. So anyway, approach an infrared sauna with caution and consistency.
All right, number 10 comes from Ashley Upchurch. She posted on our Instagram, and she asked, what's the best meal to eat in the morning before a long event?
Well, a well-portioned carbohydrate meal, of course, but there's a wide variety of choices. Good news. We got this question also on Instagram, but some examples are oatmeal, rice and eggs, granola and yogurt, pancakes. There's all sorts of choices for young athletes. The importance is, load up on carbs.
Yeah, not too much fats, because they're slow to digest.
Yeah, load it up. And then Ashley was the mom to Ava, who asked the next question. I love it, a mother-daughter question. Ava asks, is Zwift truly an effective training app? And it was just funny because as a parent, I always want to know what are good meals to prepare. So I feel you, Ashley, and keep fueling up your little cheetah cup. But Ava asks, is Zwift truly an effective training app? Which I thought was pretty interesting. The answer is yes. If it helps you have fun and follow the plan and ride more, it's yes. Knowing that Ava's only 12, I think, and I would say try it. You'll probably like it, and if you find yourself riding more and more, it's probably riding more is a great way to get faster. So if you're using Zwift to ride more, then it is an effective training app.
Fun to just change things up sometimes. Like throughout the season, you're doing the same thing. She's a mountain biker, so I'm sure she spends most of her time on the mountain bike. So maybe Zwift could be a really fun option for you, Ava.
Yeah, and then also concentrate maybe on it more in the winter time when you're indoors, and less in the summertime. Yeah,
I spend lots of hours on the trainer in the winter, and like right now I don't even want to look at it, but I will look forward to it in the winter.
Totally.
All right, number 12 comes from Kendra. She also posted on her Instagram, and she asks, after taking a long break from cycling, how many days a week should you start out doing when jumping back into training? Specifically, I've been rather sedentary during COVID. At what point should you ramp it up to 4 to 5 days a week, or should you ramp it up based on time in the saddle?
Well, first of all, Kendra, welcome back to cycling, and the short answer is both. Take it gradually for 2 to 3 to 4 weeks of just riding more, all the way up to 5 times a week. See how you're feeling. If you're feeling tired or you're motivated, I think that'll answer your question more initially. And then once you get up to riding 5 times a week, taking Mondays and Fridays off, presuming you have a normal work week, riding Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Saturday, Sunday. Once you're doing five rides a week for 1 hour roughly, that's 5 hours a week. Once you're doing that consistently, then bump up your riding volume, your hours, and then maybe go up to 6 hours, and then 7, then maybe 8, maybe even like 10 hours. And you're going to do that by maybe riding 75, 90 minutes during the work week, and then maybe moving up to 1.5, 2 hour rides on the weekends when presumably you're not racing. Or, I'm sorry, not working. But yeah, hope that helps. And yeah.
And don't forget to take your rest weeks in there too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, have fun.
All right. Number 13 comes from Dave, another Instagram user. He says, I need to lose weight, but how do I find a balance in fueling and changing eating habits? Piggybacking on this question, we also had Sean Oakwan, who asked, where should the balance lie when you want to train while also attempting to shed some weight?
Yeah. So we get this question a lot, and I would encourage everyone go back and read our weight loss for cyclists training tip. We also recorded a podcast and an accompanying video on there. But for most athletes that say they need to lose some weight, I'm just going to presume you're 10 to 15 pounds, that you'd like to lose. And the best place to start is, number one, cut out the crap out of your diet. And that is soda, alcohol, and sugar. You'd be surprised. You can do what I call, you've heard on like the popular TV shows like a makeover, do a diet makeover. I used to take college kids that I coached at CU. We would go grocery shopping and we would do a complete overhaul of the foods that they were buying. And we just got them to stop drinking, stop doing soda, and get rid of the added sugar. And it has a profound effect, and it can for you too. And you'd be surprised, if you're a soda drinker and you have 1 can of like Coca-Cola, that's in between
200 calories. Yeah,
that's a lot. So you just have less of that each day. You can probably find 250 to 500 calories per day to eliminate from your diet, and
or
you can still
iced coffees.
Yeah, whenever you get like any sugar or like a frappuccino, anything at Starbucks, they're full of calories. So the whole idea of getting rid of soda, alcohol, and sugar is you can still eat your normal diet. You're just getting rid of the kind of the fluff.
That's not benefiting your training.
Yeah. So start there, and then once you get there, you can still eat well-portioned carbohydrate meals, lean proteins, and then once you do that, then you can start eating more vegetables, and this is getting into what we call winning in the kitchen and making healthy, go-fast food choices, because 80% of weight loss occurs in the kitchen. Everyone thinks it's all about rotting more, and that's like 20%.
And that stimulates your appetite too.
That's right. It's all about winning in the kitchen is like what we like to say. So check it out and try to eliminate that out of your diet.
Yeah, we also have our weight loss meal plans that I designed, and those are built custom to you. So like I was telling Frank earlier, the female athletes, they have a lower calorie need, so their deficit needs to be smaller so they can still perform well, whereas a bigger guy can stand to cut out 500 or 600 calories a day and still be able to perform well. So if you get on those, it's kind of the work's done for you. You don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, we have 2 versions of the Winning in the Kitchen meal plans. We have the introductory version, which just concentrates on teaching you how to follow and prepare the recipes. And then we have the weight loss meal plan, which actually you follow the recipe very specifically designed by yours truly to achieve that 250 to 500 calorie deficit.
It also teaches you good meal prepping habits too, which is great.
Meal Prep Monday.
All right, number 14 comes from Greg Rosenthal. He posted on our Instagram. He said, what is the best way to acclimate to high altitude for an event? Is there any specific training to do beforehand?
Triple G. Triple G is a FasCat athlete since about 2003.
Because it's Greg spelled with 2 G's at the end.
That's right. Triple G. Anyway, Greg used to live in Denver. He has come up to my garage to do a ramp test way back when. Greg, I'm not going to divulge the results of what happened in the garage, but you and I know. And anyway, Greg now lives in North Carolina. He recently traveled to Durango, and this is where his question is coming from. You know, per the earlier question about heat adaptation infrared sauna, you could try that. But as far as like training on the bike, there's not too much training you can do beforehand unless you're talking about exercising in the heat for that heat adaptation, increase in plasma volume, possibly a little bump up in the RBCs. But yeah, once you get up to altitude, this is just where, per Greg Lyons' question about FTP, decrease your FTP by about 7%. Durango's about 7,000 feet, maybe a little under. And, also, I think Durham, that's where Greg is from, that might be at about 1,000 feet. So it actually would be 7,000 minus 1,000, which is 6,000. So decrease 6% as opposed to 7%. But once you get up to altitude, you got a lower FTP. So now your zones have been adjusted. So you're going to do that on your bike. But because you need a prolonged exposure to altitude to stimulate a meaningful bump up in red blood cell production, and that's really where the training comes in, and that's why pro cyclists do altitude camps. One of the things working with Phil Gaiman when he was at the Garmin team, the team smartly knew that in order for an altitude camp to work, it had to be for 2 weeks, and so they were tough to schedule in with the race schedules, and they're easy to schedule in preseason. But an altitude camp for 4 days is not going to produce meaningful adaptations. Getting off on a big tangent there. But Greg, I want you to use the word erythropoiesis at your next cocktail party and see if you don't get some good looks. Tell them you're stimulating erythropoiesis.
Yeah, it's kind of one thing you should expect it. Like, don't stare at your power and get all in your head at the race or the event because everybody's experiencing it. All right, number 15 comes from Paul Hartwig. He posted in our private Facebook group, and he asks, do you have any advice on how to start eating more? Personally, I started to train a lot, but I'm still trying to gain weight, which is not always easy to do when you burn a lot of calories during training. Is there any method that is more effective than others and is also essential for overall training performance?
Snacks. This is what comes to mind when I hear your question, Paul. Yeah. Pretty common for athletes who put in a lot of hours of training. I really think you want to concentrate on eating 5 to 6 times per day instead of the traditional 3. Lacey made a mention, do a post-workout smoothie or shake. You can pack one in the car. You can get a lot of carbs in there. But I really think it's like snacking. Snacking gets a bad rap because it's like, as we grew up, your mom would be like, don't ruin your dinner by snacking beforehand. But we actually advocate it, and
especially when you're training a lot, you need it.
That's right. Fuel that fire, and you can snack up to 3 times a day. You can do a mid-morning snack, you can do an early afternoon snack, and then you can do a pre-workout snack or just a late afternoon snack to get you to dinner. And so now you're eating 6 times per day, and it just really helps, especially if you're burning lots of calories. If you're doing 3-4 hour rides at 500 kilojoules in an hour, that's an extra about 2,000, 2,500 calories on top of your normal.
Basal,
yeah. So that's a lot of eating. Listen to our Winning in the Kitchen snacks. We did a whole podcast on snacking and how to do it right. Lacey would be proud that I remember it's basically sugar and fat combined with fiber. So fruit and almonds is really good. Lacey's a big fan of granola, but that's what we mean by snacking. There's a right way to snack and a wrong way to snack, I think. So don't just go off and eat cookies. That's not what we're talking about.
I also had a lot of athletes, they struggle with appetite, especially after those big rides. So fats are going to contain more calories per serving compared to say a 4th cup of carbohydrates versus a 4th cup of fat. the fat is going to have almost over twice as much. So if that's an issue, like start adding more oil when you cook your eggs in the morning, add more peanut butter to your smoothies. That's a really easy way to get calories in and keep you full.
Yeah, avocados.
Oh yeah, avocado toast. All right, number 16 comes from Jeff Bolt. He is a current FasCat athlete, and he asks, when I have a workout on my calendar, but I feel like crap, and I know I'm not going to be able to do what is scheduled, what is a good recovery workout that might help me flush out the bad mojo and get back on track to FTFP the next day?
Okay, Jeff, because you used the word mojo, you're tipping me off. And I think the secret is to prevent yourself from feeling like crap. So that's all part of developing good training habits. That's what we call FTFPing. So if you're drinking too much beer, wine, booze, and you're not getting enough sleep, or you're riding too hard, you're doing too much yard work, that's all preventable. And that's all part of FTFPing. So when we get questions about if you feel like crap, it's like, well, it seems like you're planning to feel like crap. So plan to not feel like crap. And cycling and cycling training is a 24/7, 365. It's a lifestyle. And so, if I don't want to lecture you like your mom or dad or anything. You're probably a grown man, but this is just all goes back to the FTFP podcast. And we get this question a lot with regards to drinking, and wear Whoop. That can just show you what the effect of alcohol is on your performance and sleep.
Not great, it's bad, but it's a great impact.
Right. I'm not saying don't go out and have a beer or two, but just do it strategically. And also there's another expression, I think it's called hair of the dog.
What? I've never heard that one.
It's like suck it up and keep FTFPing even if you feel like crap, because if you drink too much, it's like now you know what the effect is.
Also, some athletes are overachievers and they feel good one day and they throw in extra intervals, and the next day they feel like crap. Just follow the plan, trust the plan. The Big Cat has lots of experience. He's playing these out, and if you follow it and trust it, I promise you probably won't feel like crap.
I will say that no one ever does extra intervals. They always want to ride more, but no one does another VO2 interval.
I don't know. I've seen it, but maybe those are fewer and far between. The alcohol is probably a bigger issue. All right, number 17 comes from Rick Roof. He emailed us, and he is a longtime FasCat training plan athlete, and he asks, I'm a 59-year-old who's a better sprinter than a climber. I do lots of climbing intervals, but I still get dropped by the little climbers. At 6'2" and 170 pounds, I know I have my work cut out for me trying to keep up with them, because even though I do my VO2 climbing intervals, so do they. Watching the pros, it looks like they sprint up the climb. Is that the next step? Do I just hammer the last half of the climb and drill it over the top? But when we reach the top, I'm in the red and hyperventilating while the climbers are practically breathing through a straw and still drilling it.
Yeah, Rick, you just dig extra deep on the climbs in order to stay with the group, and then if you do tactically, you're going to be able to out sprint them when you do come to the line. And I will say this: if you become detached from that lead group on the climb, don't drop anchor. Keep going, and then hammer the downhill and see if you can't recatch that group. And then you can sit on for a little bit and then hopefully out sprint them at the end. I did that many times in my racing career. It's basically don't give up, keep going. And I got dropped on a climb of a race that I've won. And so, but it's all about that tenacity. I think really what you're talking about is just the differences in between sprinters and climbers. The Italian sprinter Colbrelli in the Tour de France, he was hanging on the climbs, and then he'd put himself in a position to out sprint all the people that were in the front group, because all the other sprinters got dropped, and so now he's the best sprinter in the bunch. And so he can just sit on and really just lick his lips waiting for the sprint. So that's it sounds to me like what your tactic is going to be. That said, that's your strength. So now you want to train your weakness. And so your weakness now is going to be getting up those climbs. So do your VO2s, cry in the dojo. And with that said, you also want to win in the kitchen, because power to weight ratio is going to be extra important. And, we have already mentioned our winning in the kitchen meal plans, the weight loss plans. But yeah, just make a plan. Really focus on your power to weight ratio as you go into the off season, as you prepare for Nats next year. And yeah, just hang tough as long as you can and be tenacious and try to catch back on. A lot of times in these amateur races where it's not like a team, they're going to sit up when they get to the bottom. That gives you the opportunity to catch back on.
Yep. All right. Number 18 comes from Erin McMahon. I think I'm pronouncing that right. She's coached by Coach Allie, and she says, my question is about handling mid-season race schedule adjustments. I've been working with Coach Allie, who is great, by the way, to dial in my switch from base to race. Originally, I had targeted 4 of the NUE mountain bike races to try and qualify for year-end points. The first of these races went great, and I'm excited about my fitness going into the rest of the season. Unfortunately, one of the races was canceled, and a series of unfortunate events caused me to miss another, which means I won't be able to qualify for the year-end points. I do want to use this excellent fitness and training, though, so how do you go about resetting and peaking for new races if you pivot? And she says it must be said like Ross from Friends, which I had to Google and I laughed, to set new race goals mid-season. What are a few actual items to stay flexible both mentally and physically?
Okay, Coach Allie, we reached out to her to answer your question. She says, great question. So what you want to do is carry on as if the races are happening until they're canceled, or if you flat out can't make it happen. Depending on the time of the year, and if you've already had a stout racing and training schedule, which you've had, wink, wink, you'll be good for a mid-season break. Then we go back to the basics, depending on when your next race is. If the next goal race is further out, then you'd hit a sweet spot training block, and then you'd get into some intensity. If the next goal race is coming up sooner after the break, then you just kick it back into high gear with intervals to ramp up that high end again. If you have races after your goal race, you should be able to carry form into those for a few weeks, as long as your weekly training has been dialed in, you FTFP. Being flexible is very important because life happens, and be sure to have your race calendar outlined with races you can make in case ones become backup goal races. This has happened like weekly last year. And this is why having a one-on-one coach is so valuable, so that you can adapt and come up with basically a new plan and to massage your form. And I will say, hats off to every single coach out there. Last year was a tough year to be a coach, because every single training block, it was like you had to basically come up with a new plan. It was like, okay, these races have been canceled. What's the new plan? All right, these races may happen, and then they didn't happen, and then we came up with a new plan. So it was like,
uncertainty.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, this question is really what we did last year. So hats off to all the coaches out there. It was a tough job last year.
All right, number 19 comes from Christopher Negro, and he is on our Tour de France plan. He says, for a rider that races road and TTs, how do you determine which bike to train on? For instance, if a rider has a large power discrepancy on the TT bike versus the road bike, would they be better served to do as many rides as possible on the TT bike to adapt to the position and decrease the power discrepancy? If the rider performed all of their intervals on the TT bike with a lower power output, limit the rider's improvements on the road bike, or would you expect the rider's power on the road bike to continue to improve due to the physiological adaptations?
Okay, I like this question a lot, but you're not going to win, Christopher. But you're like a close runner-up. But here's the deal. When done properly, your power output should be the same on TT bike, road bike. So this is a myth perpetuated by an improper time trial bike fit. And it's also probably a case for low or just not enough hip mobility and just tight hamstrings. So all the pros, everyone out there that's good at time trialing, they're making the same power down in their aero position as they could up a climb. And so if your TT bike power is way lower than your road bike power, make sure you open up your hips, make sure you have hamstring flexibility, and then make sure you're like not slammed in some crazy position that prevents you from making power. It's not you, it's your bike fit. And then the fourth thing that contribute to this myth is 2 different power meters, and the power meter on your time trial bike could be reading lower. So standardize your equipment. What we find out there in the wild is having the same brand power meter on both bikes. What we find doesn't work is if you have like a Quark on one bike and a Stages on another bike. That's why I have this gray hair right here, is trying to suss out what the heck is going on in athletes' power data. And it's not you, it's oftentimes the power data. So the integrity of your power data could be at play here, but at the level that you're probably trying to achieve, athletes physiologically have 1 FTP. And if their FTP is lower on their time trial bike, look at your fit and get that optimized. Now, on to your question. So I would plan on do all your threshold work from your plan on your time trial bike. And then not only do it on your time trial bike, do it down in the aero position. And then not only down in the aero position, but practice what we call turtling. Now, turtling, for those of you on film watching this, is when you scrunch your shoulders like this and you roll your elbows tight like this, and then you lower your head. And the best time trialists out there, they're getting their head way down low in front of their shoulders, not above their shoulders. If we had more room in this space,
Frank, I might make a meme of that. I'm going to screenshot that turtle.
But and then what you're doing is you're looking out of your eyebrows. So your head is super low, your chin is tucked way down low, your head is not punching a greater hole in the wind, and you're looking out of the tops of your eyebrows. And when done properly, your eye muscles will be sore the next day.
Ooh.
So practice it. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to get 5 minutes into a 20-minute time trial interval, and your head's going to pop right back up. And as long as you recognize that and be like, oh, whoa, I forgot to hold that position, and then scrunch back down low, that's what we call practicing, because you just got to practice how you want to play. And you hear about skills and everything, that's a skill for a time trialist. So practice your turtling, do your time trial specific workouts in the turtle position, practicing down in your aero position on your TT bike. Do your endurance rides on your road bike generally, and if you're using group rides as part of your weekly training, do the group rides on the road bike. So hope that answers your question. That's generally how most of the pros do it. If you're not a time trialist, but it sounds like you are, you're going to spend less time on the TT bike. But make sure you can do the same power.
Be a turtle.
That's right.
Channel your inner turtle. All right, number 20 comes from Kendra Tupper, and she says, I have a FasCat plan, and I'm using heart rate zones to follow the plan. I love how the workout syncs with my Garmin, and I can get the interval cues right on my bike during the workout. But it only shows zones in power and not heart rate. Is there a way to edit this so it shows heart rate instead?
I'm going to let Lacey answer this, because
I get it all the time.
She gets it all the time, and Lacey is our community manager and customer service. If you have asked a customer service question, chances are Lacey is answered. It's a simple answer, but not many people know how to do it. Yeah. So take it away, Lacey.
Usually when I get asked this, I send screenshots because it comes a little bit easier. But essentially, you just open up so you go to your calendar tab in your Training Peaks, you open up the workout, and you will have to do this for all of them. But once you know how to do it, it's really quick. So you open up the workout builder, and you click on the workout, and then you'll see at the top it'll say based on percent, I think it's percent threshold power, and then you click the drop down menu and you just change it to percent threshold heart rate. And when you do that, click save, then all of your workouts will appear based on your heart rate. And be sure to resync your Garmin so that it knows that it's based on heart rate now. But once you do that, you're good to go. It's a really easy fix.
Yeah. Everyone asks do you have to have a power meter? Can you use heart rate? My stock answer is all of our training plans, even our coaching, is zone based. So you're going to do a zone 4 workout, for example. And so your zones in power, heart rate, and even by feel. Mm-hmm. So like if you go do one workout like on a bike that has a power meter and then another workout on a bike that doesn't have a power meter like a mountain bike, you still can do it with your heart rate or by feel. So it's just that's the advantage of zone-based training, using your training zones.
You never know, your power meter might go out, so it's good to have them memorized.
That's right.
All right, number 21 comes from Jeff Beaumont. He's a longtime FasCat athlete, and he asks, for guys who are crushing their plans and hitting a high CTL, what should we do if we don't have time to keep pushing our CTL up even more? An example to apply this to more people than just me is that I'm training for Unbound Gravel 200. In Training Peaks, it predicts that I hit a CTL of 126, that's really high, in early March after Sweet Spots parts 1 through 4. If we can't really push our CTL higher than that, is it beneficial to try to keep the CTL there or to back off and do intervals?
Do intervals, Jeff. This is the switching base to race in a nutshell right there. You can't push your CTL any higher. No point in keeping it up there. Reduce your training volume. Swap over to intensity-based interval training. Reduce that training volume. Be fresh. Make a ton of watts. Crush it that way. Combine the two together when the timing is right, and then that's when you'll be your fastest. So you're going to already do that with the Sweet Spot Part 4 plan. So you're on the right track. The essence of this answer is switch from base to race.
Yeah, you can't hold that CTL for that long. You'll burn out. I've done it. I've learned the lesson the hard way. It's a lot of fatigue to carry. All right, number 22 comes from Sean, and he posted in our athlete forum. He says, like many FasCats, I have a family and a demanding job, so my training is limited to about 8 hours a week. This year, I did the basic 18 weeks of Sweet Spot plan, which raised my FTP from 280 to 300 watts. Heck yeah. He said, by the end, I felt like I was plateauing, so I decided to step it up to the intermediate road racing intervals, and as a result, feel like I'm getting stronger every week. So my question is, whether is there a known performance or FTP ceiling for limited training loads / CTL / weekly volume, i.e., at what point will training no longer yield additional power gains without increasing training load, and what are good options to keep building power once you are close to that ceiling?
So once you're close to that ceiling, just like the previous question, switch from base to race. Begin doing your intervals. We had do you remember our Instagram post, watts win races, not CTL? Mm-hmm. The same thing goes here. With regards to the question of what additional gains in your power output can you expect from CTL, this is another good question. This was in the running for the winning, but because we've covered it before, I didn't want to, I'm sorry, to make you the winner. This is really good though. Think in terms of multiples of 10. So you're at 65, I think you said. So you want to look at the performance benefit you can get from 75, 85, 95, and then maybe like even 105. And I'm going to equate it. I don't have any like formal data, like a study that's been done. My anecdotal evidence as a coach, I think you can expect to increase your power output 1 to 2% for every multiple of 10 that you go up. So you made 6.7% improvement in FTP from 280 to 300 watts by achieving a CTL of 65. Now let's add another 2% on that to get up to 75. And let's add maybe another 1.5% when you go up to 85. And then maybe another 1% when you go up to 95. Generally the gains are greater at the lower end of it, and then as you really creep up, you hit the slope of improvement levels out, and the incremental increases are much less. You know what the difference between a gold medal and 4th place is at the Olympics? About 0.001%. And so you have to train exponentially more in order to get that last little bit of percent. But think of it like in multiples of 10. And then go back and do the historical review of your seasons, and then just factor in, what's that additional time look like? Is it worth it? What's the pro and the con? You already got a young family, and then it's all about timing. Do you Do you ramp up there and hold it the whole season? Do you ramp up and do it right before your number one race, which is what we recommend? That's the timing is everything. That's a good way to achieve it. And then after your race is over, then you let your training volume go back down to balance out with family life, so you can make good dad watts. I could go on and on about this one. I even created a chart, but we're on a podcast here.
We'll throw that into the...
Yeah, we'll throw it into the show notes. And we should just keep moving on because we're coming up on 1 hour and we're only like halfway done. So, a
little over halfway.
Go get a snack, hit the pause, and keep listening in. We're going to keep going.
All right, number 23 comes from Licky Andav. He posts in our forum, and he is also a FasCat athlete ambassador. And he says, I'm hoping to get a slot for the 140-mile SPT gravel course in 2022. I've done a few gravel events, and I think I have a good idea how I want to approach preparing for it. For training, I'm thinking the fall foundations, followed by 10 weeks of weightlifting, then the 18 weeks of sweet spot, have my lower priority gravel race, then do the gravel plan, and then do SPT gravel.
You're right on track there. That is the progression of our training plans, and that's also what we have in our 32-week off-season weightlifting and sweet spot base plan. That's available on our website. It's 32 weeks. Takes all the guesswork out of your whole off-season of training, and then when you get done with that 32 weeks, that's applicable to all athletes, all endurance athletes, whether you're mountain, road, time trial, gravel, criterium, all your training is more or less going to look the same. But then when you get done with that 18 weeks of sweet spot, that's when you go into your specialty phase, which is road intervals if you're a roadie, mountain bike intervals, climbing. That's when you begin to specialize. Let's read her second question, and then because it's a good one too.
It says, the course is a mystery, though.
This is the SPT course. Yeah.
Could you share some insight into the Gucciness, which is how Frank refers to the gravel, the Gucciness of the gravel, the perceived flatness of the course, ideal tire choice, temperatures to expect in that part of Colorado? Also, would some aero bars be helpful? Would they be comfortable to help the arms relax? Okay.
So the gravel in Colorado, it's not like other parts of the world where the roads are just chunky, rocky, or gravel. The reason why we have a lot of gravel roads in Colorado is just because they're so rural, and they don't want to use taxpayer dollars to pave them. And then if they did pave them, they're still going to be under snow for like half of the year. So it doesn't matter if it's paved or not. So a lot of the local municipalities just are like, let's just save money. Let's not pave them. And then what they actually are hard packed dirt. And when it's hard pack, it really behaves a lot like asphalt. So that's what we mean by the Gucciness. But what happens is when cars and trucks go over the hard packed dirt, if it's been really dry, it kicks up the dirt and makes it loose. That's what creates those stutter bumps.
Ugh.
Yeah, stutter bumps are difficult. Let's just say it. They suck.
It's like brain rattling.
Loosen your fillings. But then what happens is if we get rain or moisture, and then cars go back, it's like the what are those big things when they pave streets and they have that roller tractor that smooths out the. That's what happens with our dirt roads, and so cars roll back over it. They smooth out the stutter bumps. They pack down the dirt, and then it's back to hard pack asphalt. But guess what? Because we get variable rains and car traffic, the roads are just highly variable from 1 mile to the next, and it just really depends. It can vary from one day to the next based on rainfall and also just car traffic. And then there's other parts of the course where if the course gets steep and cars accelerate, those tires loosen up the course more. But that's a little bit about the Gucciness. The other part of the course of Steamboat is go back and watch our Steamboat Gravel Power Data Analysis podcast and video. We literally take viewers through the whole entire podcast from my race data 2 summers ago. And there's close to 10,000 feet of climbing. So, bring your climbing socks and, win in the kitchen and all that stuff. There are significant portions of the course that are flat, like 20 to 30 miles maybe even 40. You don't even know you're climbing up, and then the next thing you know, you're like hauling ass downhill for like 10, 15, 20 miles. And then you get to the final 40 miles, and it's got like, it's just up and down. It's very difficult. The first 100 miles, you know, to overgeneralize it, are easy, little climbing, a lot of flat, a lot of pack riding, where drafting is advantageous. And then the final 40 miles is just, you know, that's a climber's delight. So that's what you're, you know, expect to do, a lot of climbing, but there's plenty of flat riding. As far as the temperature, it's hot, it's cold, it's mountains. It was 37 degrees at the start. Oof. 2 years ago, 7 a.m. Excuse me, and then it was 105 during the race, about 4 hours later. So I didn't bring any arm warmers or knee warmers, but when I was going over to the start line, I was like, man, it's cold. So I wore my jeans over top my kit, and then I took off my jeans and handed them to a friend at the start line. And yeah, it was cold for like 5 minutes, but you start going pretty hard, so you generate heat. So all the people that wore like vests and arm warmers and leg warmers,
they stuff them into their
they all had to stop. They all had to take them off. Then they all had to lug it around. So I would recommend start cold, maybe arm warmers max, and then, you know, then you can put those in a pack or your back pockets later on in the race when it heats up. But it heats up really quick. You know, by 8:30 or 9, it's already up in the 80s, and you know, that when it was just so hot. Plan on jumping into the river right by the finish line. It feels really good.
I think it's supposed to be in the 80s this year, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, but no matter which way, it's going to be 80s, but it'll feel hotter in the direct sun. But you combine all that. You combine the gravel, the distance, the climbing, and the heat. It's a doozy of the race. And also, I would not recommend aero bars. In fact, you'll probably get heckled if you do use them, because you're riding in a pack, or you should be. It's just a lot of pack riding dynamics. And surefire way to not make friends is get down in your aero bars in a pack, because you're just risking a crash. And there's a lot of high-speed descents where you need to be on the brakes, out on your hoods, or down in your drops for high control, all of which, you know, you're not with aero bars. So I'd leave those at home, to be honest.
I asked one more question because I got asked the other day. Would you recommend having a hydration pack or having 3 bottles and relying on the aid stations?
Hydration pack for sure,
yeah,
because 3 bottles, there's a aid station every 25 miles, but yeah, hydration pack will be way better. Yeah.
Licky actually just commented mild frostbite and heat exhaustion in the same day. Excellent.
Yeah, that's about right. That's why these races are the way they are.
That's funny. All right. Owens number 24, and this comes from Kevin Hood. He asks, how does one physically and mentally prepare to complete an ultra-endurance race when they know their fitness will result in them taking 2 times as long to finish compared to the pros? I think the mental and not necessarily the physical preparation is different than what gets covered for, say, Cat 1 through 4 athletes for the following reasons. You're likely riding solo more often in the event. You have more stress at the possibility of missing a cutoff. You might be covering rough ground in the dark, etc. I would love for you to include some actual riders and their perspectives.
Yeah, so when I read your question, Kevin, the first thing I really kind of thought of was the post-race podcast and video we did with Coach Isaiah, who had just done Unbound, and you know, he wasn't racing it, but he was doing it to finish and just the experience of it. So he took his time, he was patient, you know, he stopped in the aid stations, you know, and he's a former pro. And 2 years ago, he would have been hanging, you know, with the Stetnas and the Boswells and all those guys, really digging deep to hang with them. And so I think Isaiah's experience and just what he shared in that video is really important, because he had a plan to be patient. And really his goal was to experience the day, beat the sun, and, you know, not rush it. And I think that's what gets a lot of amateur athletes in trouble, is they have unrealistic expectations of their finishing time. Mm-hmm. In order to get a realistic expectation of your finishing time, use your data and project out when you think you're going to finish. Add like 45 minutes to that for mishaps and, you know,
mechanicals,
all the stuff that's going to happen out there, flats, all that stuff. And then, you know, you may be saying, what are you talking about? How to use your data? Well, it's power to weight ratio, and there's a website out there. It's called Best Bike Splits. You can plug in your power to weight ratio. You can plug in the GPX file of the course, and it will calculate out your projected finishing time. Take that, add 45 minutes to it for mishaps, aid station stops, and so forth. And that's a great place to start. But if Best Bike Splits or your data says you're going to finish in 16 hours, don't try to push the pace and do 14, because that's probably
blow up,
not realistic. You will blow up, but you also create like undue stress on yourself. And so that's how I would prepare mentally.
And do like a stimulation ride to like get an idea of how your body responds to those big events. Like,
exactly,
it's huge.
All these simulation rides are meant to prepare you for just that. And then with the caveat of, if you can't do your simulation ride on course, which not many people can, you just try to choose a course that's as hard with as much climbing.
Yeah, use Strava. The route builder's great.
That's right.
And then sometimes it'll even tell you your estimated time, although it's not always very accurate, but it can give you an eyeball and really just give you some preparation going in. Set your own goals. Remember, you're racing your own race. And if you can meet your own goals, you'll be very proud of yourself. So don't compare yourself to others. It's the biggest thing.
That's right.
Hard to do, though. Number 25 comes from Marco Gacki. He posted our Instagram, and fun fact, he biked across America. So he asks, can you still do fun rides with friends even when you're training? Is there a limit? I'd like to start a training plan, but I also enjoy riding long distances on the weekends with my friends and my local bike group, and would love to balance both.
Heck yes, Marco, you may. And oftentimes these fun group rides with friends, they're hella good training. So analyze your data, evaluate how good these group rides were, and look for little nuggets of like VO2 and anaerobic power in your ride data. Nothing better than a spirited group ride with friends, and that's what I call hard organic power. See our video from a previous podcast talking about integrating group rides into structured training. And if you were to hire a coach, your coach would talk with you to find out when your group rides are, but then analyze the data from those group rides and then say, go back and do this again, please. It was so good for your training. Or, this is not that hard of a group ride, and let's just use this as a zone 2 day. Or, this group ride was so easy for you, it's not going to help you get to your goals. So do that group ride as a social ride. Things like that. So analyze your data, but definitely plan on going and doing the social group rides. In my experience, very few group rides are so easy that they don't provide.
We're going to do zone 2. No, it never turns out that way.
Yeah. It may be zone 2 for a little bit, but there's always those nuggets of VO2 in there, and that's why group rides are so good.
Racing to the stop sign.
Yeah.
All that fun stuff.
Also go, I think I mentioned this. Yeah, check out our fitting group rides into structured training tip.
Put that in the show notes. All right, number 26 comes from Pedro Piera. He is a FasCat training plan athlete, and he posted on our Instagram and says, I'm preparing for the XCO National Mountain Bike Race Series consisting of 6 to 7 races from April to September. How do I manage season peaking for this kind of racing? Should I double peak or aim to single peak for mid-June or July and try to extend it to the end of the season?
Double peak, Pedro. The key to being able to double peak is training year-round, and it's good periodization, doing all the right things, at all the right times, good training phases. That's what we've been talking about with our Timing is Everything podcast. And then the approach that I take with athletes that are doing a season-long series or everything is we'll try to do that first peak at the beginning of the series, the first race. Really, get out ahead, get some points, establish a lead, get that good performance in there. And then your good form is going to continue on for, let's say, 2 to 3, 4 weeks. So whenever the other series races are. And then you're going to look for opportunities in between when that series is. This is way difficult in cyclocross because cyclocross is a condensed season into about 10 weeks, maybe 12 tops. But I think for mountain bike nats, if you start in April and then your series goes to September, that's a fairly long time. That's like, close to six months, maybe 5. So then you can peak at the beginning, you can eke out as much form as you can by getting into an in-season training plan or phase. You can even take a break in there when you're getting crispy, or maybe there's a break in the competition schedule. And then if you have time, this is what Coach Allie was talking about for Aaron's question, you can add in a sweet spot block to build back up to try to do the double peak. Or if that goal event is coming sooner, you get right back into it, down to business with intervals again. Maybe even you don't even take a mid-season break if the end of the season is coming up. But yeah, that's the double peak is the holy grail of kind of training and coaching and racing. It's very difficult, but the second peak is more difficult. You can have like really good form, but to peak twice in a year is difficult, but at least you've gotten that first peak in, those great performances, and then you have the chance to do the second peak. But you never want to like go into the season underdone, saying you're going to try to do a single peak later on. That never goes well. Yeah.
All right, moving on to James Enzalone.
Mm-hmm.
He posts in our athlete forum. He is one of Coach Jake's one-on-one athletes, and he says, with racing starting, I'm feeling at a bit of a crossroads. The races here have full fields, like 80 plus riders. I've been FTPing and I feel at my best fitness level ever. But as a 50-year-old master athlete with responsibilities, I'm daunted by the possibility of serious injury these days. I should mention that I had a bad crash at the beginning of a race this season and it took over a month to heal. So my question is, do you have any tips on dealing with the mental fear of crashing so that fitness can shine through and racing can be enjoyable again? He also noted in his question that he is a good bike handler. He's just nervous and he thinks that other people might be struggling with the same thing.
Yeah, you lost your mojo, James. It happens. We've all had crashes, and sometimes they're not even your fault. You're just victim to them. And Coach Jake, we reached out to him for the answer. He says, unfortunately, crashing is sometimes unavoidable, even when you put when you put this many riders together. Safest place to ride are at the front of the race or on the front. And I'll take that even further. The safest place in a crit is on the inside of the corner, because when crashes happen, they all bounce to the outside. So the least safe place is on the outside of the corner. So if you're doing a crit, be at the front, ride in the top. Don't ride on the front, but ride in that arrowhead at the front, and you can control your destiny. When we took riders over into Europe on the national team, that's the biggest thing that they struggled with, is pack positioning and crashes. But it's like Darwin out there. The strongest riders are at the front and the weakest riders are at the back, and the weaker riders are the ones that are going to crash and cause a mishap. So if you are being lazy or not, it's worth spending energy and power output to stay up front. That's where the stronger riders are. That's where the crashes are less likely to happen. That's what you see in the Tour de France with all those teams, even like the yellow jersey team in the final 5K, when that rider has no chance of winning, but they're riding right up there on the front to protect him. So think of it like that way. But Jake also goes on to say, do a few races, work on your pack positioning, and then get your confidence back. This is finding your mojo again, and then take risks. He just says racing is you take a risk whenever you ride your bike or not. Some riders look to other events, and I see this a lot with the popularity of gravel, even cyclocross, and unless you see a lot of guys stop doing criteriums and even road races as they get older. It's like they've learned
their lesson.
Yeah, they've learned their lesson, but they also, the joke is, I got to go to work on Monday, and Jay goes on to say, races that are more selective, gravel racing as opposed to criterium racing. A lot of athletes, that's why athletes do a lot of time trials and hill climbs. Guess what? They're safe. There's no crashes in hill climbs. Not really. Same way with time trials, because you're not riding in that pack. But criterium's tough.
Yeah. Obviously, like for mountain biking, if you crash, because it's like your own fault, like get out there when you're able to start training again, practice, slowly build up that confidence, because the crashes usually come from you hesitating and not being confident in your skills. So really practicing and working on that confidence is huge.
Yeah, even like, mountain biking gets a bad rap, but when you crash, you've usually crashed yourself and you're just hitting the ground versus a criterium. Those crashes are gnarly.
Yeah.
And I used to crash once every cross-country race, guaranteed. You just kind of learn to crash. And
you learn how to crash good. You learn how to catch yourself.
You get scraped up, but you don't like break bones and stuff like that.
I
Same way with
notoriously hit
cyclocross.
Like that's my falling spot, but I've never broken anything.
Yeah, like cyclocross is, you're always on the deck, but it's mud and dirt. It's soft landing. So,
cushion.
Yeah. Anyway, a little tangent there. Let's move on.
All right. Number 28 comes from James Howitt. He posts in our athlete forum, and he is a new FasCat training plan athlete, and he is from Denver. He says, I live at altitude, as I'm sure many do. My A race this year takes place at sea level, though, and I know I won't be watching my power during the race, but I'm wondering if the coaching staff has data on FTP and how it is affected when you get the short-term, quote, sea level watts. Are we talking 2 watts or 20?
Yeah, it could be 20 watts, although it is a percentage of your FTP. It depends on what that percentage is. If you're at Denver, in Denver, 5280, that's our elevation, you're going down to sea level, that's a 5% bump up in your power. So to get 20 watts from 5%, do the quick math. 10% of a 300 watt FTP is 30 watts, so 5% is 15 watts. So your FTP is going to need to be about 350 to get a 20 watt bump. But so say your FTP is 300, you get a 5% bump, that's 15 watts. That's pretty legit. You're going to feel it. The point is, when you go down to altitude, you feel like King Kong. Mm-hmm. You're ripping the cranks off. Again, this is why pros live and train at altitude, to get that effect when they do go to sea level competition. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. I will say this, raise your FTP in your zones when you get down to altitude, so that you're not artificially, your TSSs are not artificially inflated, and consequently your CTL. But like if you go down and do a training block, definitely raise your FTP.
Yeah, your phone would be like negative 50. You're like, what's going on?
Yeah. It's that garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. All right, number 29 comes from Jimmy Porter. He posted on our Instagram, and he's from Oregon, and he says, I am 50 plus, looking to drop some weight, but the needle doesn't move much, no matter how many miles I put in. I'm 6'3" and 210, looking to get down to 190. Any tips?
Same answer as before, Jimmy. Cut out the crap, clean up your diet, cut out the sugar, the alcohol, the processed foods, be a sugar detective, no added sugar. Win in the kitchen with healthy food choices, because 80% of weight loss is in the kitchen, 20% is on the bike. And
this is me. I said, I noted earlier about the guy who's looking to put on weight. Be mindful of your fat intake. Like, it's so easy to use 4 tablespoons of peanut butter. If you just cut that down to 2, like, you're cutting out 200 calories a day. Same thing with using oil when you're cooking. If you're making eggs, use the spray cooking oil and don't just pour it straight into the pan. You save yourself, over the course of the day, for 3 meals, 400, 500 calories. Over a week, that's a pound right there. So it's a really easy way.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to number 30. This one comes from Ryan Collins. He posted on Instagram, and fun fact, he just placed 3rd at the Grand Fondo Nationals in Asheville. Nice. And he says, I was always told to ride at a cadence of 90 RPMs. Under that was too much muscular strain, and above was inefficient. However, now the pros spin well above and below that depending on the course. What are the physiological reasons or benefits to spin fast or slow? When should we select one over the other? I wonder if he noticed other people's cadences at that race.
So whatever you're doing it right, because you placed 3rd. Yeah. So congrats on that. I like for athletes to pedal at what I call their natural cadence. And then I look at their data, and as I'm seeing it coming in, if I see it under 80 RPMs or over 100 RPMs, I'll take a closer look at what's going on. And I think that can be optimized. But generally, most riders, 85 to 95 RPMs. And if you're doing above and below that, look at it closer and, see what's going on. There's such a thing called the power band. When you're in your power band between 85 and 95, you're going to be able to make your best watts. When you get down below that, that's when riders can't sustain like their best power outputs. Like when you go up that super steep hill and you can't even ride your threshold watts, but then you're out of your power band because you're pedaling 65 RPMs. And so when I see that data come in, or we know we're doing a race with that steep stuff, it's like, okay, go get bigger gears. Long time ago, we all raced on 1123 rear cogs, 5339. Now we're like, on what we joke as grandpa gears, the compact cassettes, 5034, with like an 1130 or 32, even greater with the SRAM single ring setups. They have these big giant pie plates on the back, little gears on the front, and you can get some really good gear ratios for that steep climb with traditional gears that you're doing 65. You can maybe do 80, 85 in your normal power band, and therefore, make your best power. So that's kind of the way I approach the cadence question. I don't think there's a one hard and fast cadence that all riders must do because it is so individual. I mean, this is Jan Ulrich, he was a masher, right? He had low cadence versus Armstrong, super high cadence. And that's when this debate really began, because there was a certain group or coach out there that said they had found the secret sauce for training of like, oh, we trained him to make higher cadence, and that's how we made all these gains, which was complete hogwash. Yeah. But it sounded really good on TV, and that's how this whole cadence thing. But yeah, Jan Ulrich was doing just fine mash, and it's just individual preference. So if you are doing single speed, because I think we did get a single speed question, or even on the track single speed, to accelerate and go faster on the track, you just got to pedal faster. That's how that sport is. Same way with single speed, but you also got to get used to the lower cadences. So that's why you got to train on the single speed and race on it, because you still need to expand your power band, not try to stay in it, because that's the way
I experienced this weekend. I'm a mountain biker. I used a huge cassette, rode a barred gravel bike with very little, like the gearing range was not good, and I'm typically very good at long races and events, and by 4 hours in, just having to grind up those climbs, like my muscles were just like no more. Like it wasn't my optimal cadence, and I knew it. So it's really listening to yourself and what's best for you.
And get bigger gears. Yeah,
bigger gears. Go big or go home. All right, number 31. Could not find the name, but his Instagram handle is Lee Flying Mustachio, and he says
the Flying Mustachio.
Mustachio. I said that wrong. I pronounced it like pistachio.
It's okay.
All right. He said, between foam rolling, massage, ice baths, massage tools, electrical stimulation, and compressive flow like the Normatec's, how does one choose the appropriate recovery method? Does one trump the rest? And also, can you match workout fatigue with a particular recovery modality?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you want to try to think is try to do as many as you can in the order of their effectiveness. And the one thing that you left out is sleep. Sleep is the number one recovery tool. And so, if you're getting 4 hours of sleep a night, if you do every single one of those recovery modalities you mentioned, you're not going to recover. So knock off 8 hours of sleep first, and then go to your other recovery modalities. I would, right behind 8 hours of sleep and proper nutrition, I would put massage. That is really, really good. That's why all the pro teams have massage therapists, soigneurs, and then Normatec's are not far behind, because they basically are like getting a massage with the convenience of your own home, and then rolling. Then going on to the electrical stim and all that. But you can't forget your nutrition either. Your recovery meals and your nutrition on the bike, that's all part of recovery. So don't forget that. If you do, no amount of these recovery modalities are going to overcome, the caloric deficit and the lack of recovery that you'll see from that.
I also had stress, like making sure you manage your stress. That's huge.
Yeah, control your stress, do your meditation. We have a future question on that. So I'll leave it at that. But read our recovery training tip and podcast. We even went and, sat in float tanks. We did cryotherapy. So we include that in recovery modalities. But guaranteed, hands down, number one recovery modality is sleep.
It's the most easily accessible too.
That's right. I mean, also like laying on your couch, that's a good recovery tool.
Yeah, and making sure you get your adult responsibilities done on Sunday or Monday, get them out the way so you don't have that stress during the week. All right, number 32 comes from Daniel Lamb. He says, is there any benefit to elliptical chain rings such as Q rings for an amateur level cyclist? Do they suit one discipline more than the other? Do they benefit a particular mesocycle of a training plan more than others? What does the science say? And most importantly, what does the big cat have to say about the topic?
Okay, I can tell you're greasing the wheels to be the winner here.
You might be talking about Chester.
Yeah. So here's what I say. It's all about your power output. And personally, I've never used oval rings, but I've had many athletes that use them and say they like them. I think it was the way that they felt they could get on top of the gear at that 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock position. That's the dead spot of your pedal stroke. And so the elliptical rings help them get over it and maintain higher, better feeling cadences. My take is, though, you gotta feel the difference for yourself. And, you know, because there's inconclusive scientific evidence out there. Some of the scientific papers may say 1.5% improvement in power output, but objective peer review studies are more or less inconclusive. Now, if you go to like the Osymetric website, they'll say 7 to 10%.
Marketing.
Yeah. But I mention Osymetric because those elliptical rings were really popular with the Wiggins-Froome era, and I'm pretty sure they were getting paid to ride those rings. And that's what kind of brought up the popularity of them. But the other problem with those rings, it creates this Frankenbite like phenomenon where I call it Frankencrank. And it creates this Frankencrank thing, and for most power meters that are spotter based like Quark and SRM, it really messes, I think, with the integrity of your power data output or power data. And so, in going back to my original, what I was saying is you got to feel it to see if it's going to work for you. That's a lot of effort to create a Frankencrank and then go through the whole entire mechanical process of trying it out. I think that's the limitation, honestly. That's why I've never tried it, because there was nothing ever out there that says this is a 4% bump in performance. So leave the Frankencrank at home. The other thing is, I don't think you see many elliptical chain rings on. I should go and check this at the Tour de France. How many riders are using elliptical chain rings nowadays?
I see it mostly with mountain bikers.
Yeah.
Everybody I've heard that say they like them, they were mountain bikers.
Interesting.
That's just my personal experience.
Sure, yeah.
All right, number 33 comes from Jack Arnold, and he says, I recently started a summer job working at a construction site to help pay for college. When I started the job, I was finishing up 18 weeks of sweet spot and about to start road intervals. At university, I ate well, got 8 hours of sleep, and because of that, I was always able to FTFP and add extra zone 2 when the plan allowed. After starting the job, I began to see a change in my energy levels. I struggled to complete workouts that before I thrived on. Therefore, I'm wondering what I can do. My plan of attack is to up my carb intake, as I'm essentially adding a gym session each day, so I need to fuel my muscles for that, and to slightly increase my protein and vegetable intake to help rebuild muscle and aid in recovery. I'm also trying to increase my sleep further, but it's hard with my tight schedule. Is there anything else I can do to regain some power/freshness to aid in recovery?
I think the biggest thing you need to do, Jack, is adjust your training volume to match just the increased load from this construction job. No doubt, that's really, really hard. Former FasCat athlete Jim Stemper did construction in the winter, and we never could train near as much as when he stopped doing construction and moved to California and then went back to a full-time training and racing regime. Then you can almost like double your training. But because you're a young student, you probably can handle it. The one thing not to let go is that sleep, and then maybe a reduction in training volume. The other thing I'll mention, because you're a young athlete, is I would have at least one day a week where you come home from your job and you just hit the couch. And that's probably Monday. Great day for that. You just totally veg out. You have a good dinner. you go to sleep, you get your 8 hours, and then you can do the whole construction, do your workout, eat, sleep, repeat. You may be a candidate for doing your workout before you go to your job. Although a lot of construction jobs start at 7 a.m. or even earlier, but that's just one idea. But I think overall you're looking at decreasing your training volume to balance out your lifestyle and stuff. All right, let's keep moving on.
I know, my phone's running out of battery over here. All right, number 34 comes from BJ Justice. He says, now that I've gotten older, I tend to get extremely hot when riding and I sweat profusely. Besides staying hydrated with water, what advice do you have?
So what I just alluded to in my previous answer, the number one habit of Master Cyclist in our 7 Habits for Successful Cyclists training tip and podcast is they ride in the morning, and they do that because it's less hot then. Not only do you get your workout in before the day begins and you get tired and fatigued, but here in Boulder, I rode Tuesday morning, 2 days ago, 61 degrees at the start. And guess what it was like 6 hours later?
85.
Like 95,
Oof.
Just death hot. You can't even barely make power or watch. You can't even do your workout.
Can't breathe.
Yeah, so that's why it's the number one habit. So that would be my first example. No amount of hydration, heat adaptation is going to overcome that. And by exercising in the morning at those lower temperatures, you subject yourself to less physiological stress from the environment, and that's going to, in the long run, add up. It's not going to add up cumulatively, and you'll benefit much better that. So that would be my biggest thing. Sweating profusely is nothing to be concerned about, and you can only staying hydrated and doing all that can only take you so far.
Yeah, he said with water, so make sure you're using electrolytes too, because that'll help a little bit. But yeah, like you said, you can't out-train the heat. It's gonna zap your power. All right, number 35 comes from Mitch Zawaski, and he posted on our Facebook. He says, I've got 6 gap coming up in about 9 weeks, and I live in Florida where it's extremely flat. Which of your plans would you suggest to prep for it? I've got a good base, but I need to prep for those long, sustained climbs.
Yeah, so Mitch, our climbing intervals plan is your best bet for that. And then in this plan, because we get this question a lot, because there's a lot of places that are flat in the country and have athletes training for, events or races that are hilly. And it's trained by zones. And concentrate on your threshold power. Your climbing intervals plan will do that. And so when you do a zone 4 workout, which is what you'll be faced to do on the gaps up in Georgia, you can still do that zone 4 workout at home. You're just going to do it in a different mode. So you're either going to do it outside on the flat. Because you're training by zones, you're going to make sure you try to hold your zone 4 watts or your zone 4 heart rate, zone 4 feel. And you're just not climbing, but physiologically you're accomplishing more or less close to the same thing. But it's all from doing zones. So just because you can't climb in Florida doesn't mean you can't use zones and the expected physiological adaptations from achieving the wattages in those zones to train just the same. If you really want to get involved, speaking of being hot, Florida's really hot, you may enjoy doing an indoor trainer workout where you got more to push against, and you can exercise in like a cool 68 degrees, and you can do some really great climbing workouts indoors on your smart trainer or even your dumb trainer by just following a zone-based plan. So check it out. But yeah, 300 watts on the flat in Florida is not that different than 300 watts in Georgia up the gaps.
The only thing that's different is your speed.
Yeah, there's like some biomechanic differences, but yeah, you can't really adjust those. I mean, it's like 98% of the way there.
Yeah. All right, number 36 comes from Bill Vaughn. Bill Vaughn. I missed the N. He's a one-on-one coached athlete with Coach Frank, and he says, Frank, you've got me covered on all of the metrics for physical training and weight loss. I'd like mental metrics from my power data. I use perceived exertion, but that's a subjective, and I lie to myself. I use my power numbers, but that is influenced by how much training is still left in my legs on a given day, among other things. What WKO metrics are there to show me how far I've quote, drain the tank for each interval beyond my actual power numbers. Does DFRC work or anything else?
Hey, Bill, thanks for your question. I mean, I think those mental metrics are yet to be developed. And honestly, they're independent of your power data. Because it's really what's going on in your brain, right? That's what you're asking. And you can maybe say FRC shows that you're getting fatigued, but really the question I ask as a coach is, yeah, but how hard were you pushing? Were you really pushing super hard or not? And only you can really answer that question. The power data can't. The power data is very objective, and that's why we have the post-activity comments for you to describe and elaborate on them. And then, just for the listeners out there, if an athlete types in, I went really deep in order to hit all 4 of my VO2 intervals, that means one thing. Or similarly, if I see that there was a drop-off in the 4th interval and they're like, yeah, I kind of phoned that 4th interval in. That's a mental metric to me. Or if there was a big drop off and they were like, I still turned myself inside out. I'm like, okay, they were really pushing hard. And then because their power data is low, that they reach their physical limit, for example. If you were biting your stem and you're telling me that you're doing so, that's meaningful as a mental metric to me as a coach. And as a side note, this is where watching races is highly beneficial as a coach, because you're going to see the physical effort that the rider is exerting. I mean, are their shoulders rocking? Are they like slobbering out of their mouth, biting the stem? You can tell when an athlete is giving it their all, or if they look really comfortable, or they nice and smooth, or do they give up easy, things like that. You can see all that by watching a race. And because I've motor paced, many athletes for a cumulative of over 30,000 miles, I can certainly tell you when an athlete is giving it and when they're not. And I've seen some guys do amazing things in the mirror behind the scooter of just turning themselves inside out to stay on the wheel. And then you can go and look at that in their power output, or you can go and look at that section of the race where they were just turning themselves inside out. And then you got to put the 2 and 2 together. But I don't know if there's a metric out there that does that, until there's like some AI, hook some electrodes to your brain that goes into the power data. I don't know if that exists yet. But I think also with regards to the training plan, and a lot of athletes, they're looking for this something out there to give them an excuse to not go hard anymore. Like, okay, and that's not the way good training works. I think what a lot of athletes out there need to do is get to that point where they are turning themselves inside out. Do that final interval. Don't second guess the plan or the coach and say, I stopped because I was tired. Don't do that. Literally, this is another FTFP example. And let the coach see what happens from you turning yourself inside out, and then let them make that adjustment downstream. But a lot of athletes, they go all the way up until a point and they get to that part where it's really uncomfortable and then they back off, versus the successful athletes, they go way up until that point and they just try to pound down that door and accomplish that workout on that last few intervals. Those are the athletes that are going to break through and get to the next level. But you got to let the training plan and the coach do that to you. That's
a huge part of training too, is just knowing your mental abilities. Like, the further you push it, the next time you could push it that far, and then you can go a little bit further and a little bit further. And that's how champions are made.
Yeah, you got to work on knocking down that door, which is a little bit different than your question, but that's kind of where we went with that. And then go back and listen to our How to Leave Post-Activity comments for your coach and be coachable in a previous podcast.
Yep, and again, that'll be in the show notes. All right, number 37 comes from, I believe his first name's Ryan Crabb. Is it?
Yeah, Ryan Crabby, I think.
I know him from Instagram. He is a training plan athlete, and his son just won 2 road national titles. He asks, I'm a 46-year-old father of 3 boys. I try my best to stick to training plans, but at times I slip. My oldest son recently had quite a bit of success at junior nationals. How do I best incorporate my training rides into training and riding with him so we both get the most benefit? A lot of my goals have shifted in order to support them and their passion for cycling.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you do is you shift your goals to support your sons as opposed to your goals. I mean, that, cycling can be such a selfish, hobby and passion, but I think you're right to, give your son a higher priority than maybe your training. So keep it real like that, and let your goals be secondary to your son's goals. And so ride with him first, and then if it works out, to do your workout together, that's kind of a win-win. Or maybe you do your training after you ride with your son. That's how a lot of dads and moms do it. That's also a win-win. And then, if your workout doesn't get done for one reason or another, I mean, I think that's going to be fine too, because that's all part of making your goals secondary to your son's. And I think what you don't want to do is be like, I'm following this plan come hell or high water, and sorry, son, I can't go riding with you. I don't even think you're thinking like that, but I'm just
you
gonna.
can tell he's huge supportive of his kids.
Yeah. So you see a lot of this with NICA parents and cyclocross parents, and just junior parents overall. They let their goals go in preference of their kids. That's what it's all about.
What you gotta do. All right, number 38 comes from Wayman. He posted on our Instagram, and Coach Ali answered this question, but he asks, how can coaching be beneficial for athletes that love cycling but don't have racing plans in their future?
Yeah, I mean, more and more athletes are out there that want to be the best versions of themselves. They want to ride faster. They want to get PRs, like on Strava. Zwift is given a big increase in the rise. And so now you have athletes out there that are no longer doing the traditional races and events, and but they still want to ride faster, and that's where coaching comes in. And so Ali goes on to say, coaching is beneficial for many reasons, even if you don't have any racing plans. The first thing that comes to mind is the more you put into your riding over time, the easier it gets, and then the faster you get. And then, a coach is very beneficial for giving you structure to hold you accountable, to help you exercise and push yourself probably farther than you're going to push yourself on your own. Cyclists also can use their coach as a mentor to kind of educate them on the sport. Ali goes on to say that she loves sharing her experiences that she had while racing and training with her athletes. She can relate to the mental side and the physical ebb and the flow and the time constraints and the scenarios where they could have gotten further along in the group or everything by making less mistakes. That's what a good coach does, is just share with you. There is maybe a misconception out there that all we do is design training plans. Mm-hmm. Well, what we do, that's like the tip of the iceberg. There's this whole more wealth of information of just sharing our knowledge with athletes to help them ride faster.
It's the art.
That is the art. And the other thing is helping training be fun. And you can still accomplish your goals and ride faster and having it be fun. A lot of, cyclists can make training not fun, and it shouldn't necessarily be that way. But you can take a time crunch workout that's very productive, and, you can help get athletes to, understand that, hey, maybe this only takes an hour a day. You don't need to do this for 2 hours. Ali goes on to say she had an athlete who had no race goals, and his goal was to see his feet, aka lose some weight. And so she put together a plan for him to ride consistently while doing intervals to get his heart rate up, and he lost over 40 pounds, and that's in a decent amount of time. And she didn't even really have to give him like nutrition plans, just let him eat naturally. And she just kind of gave him some basic nutrition, like eat less of this, probably sugar, more vegetables, cut out soda and alcohol. And that's kind of like what a coach can help you with, whether you're active or not. And there's another expression is, if you're active, you're an athlete, and if you're an athlete, you can benefit from having a coach.
Yep. All right, we're closing in.
Number 41.
This comes from Zach Neer. He is a loyal podcast listener, and he asks, my question may be a little bit out of bounds, but it's something that I've never heard anyone have a serious discussion about before, and I'm genuinely curious. How does sex impact cycling and athletic performance? Surely there's a correlation between having sex and producing testosterone, but is that enough to influence athletic performance? How does it differ between males and females, and can having too much sex negatively impact athletic performance?
All right, Zach. We thought this was a very thought-provoking question, and we will answer it seriously. And but unfortunately, there was a more thoughtful question. Just to get that out of the way. I think we've all heard of the Belgian logic, and the Belgian logic is no sex during stage races. Old school racing lore, and that'll decrease performance. The Belgians, they get a hard time because they have these like funny rules, but yeah, they also had rules like no, you can't shave your legs the morning of the race or something like that. But that's the Belgian evidence. But it turns out that there is scientific evidence attributed to abstinence and in the increase in testosterone production. And the thought actually goes back to ancient Greek and Roman times with the gladiator fighting. And they would have gladiators abstain from sex leading up to their fights and believing it was a performance benefit. I did a quick lit review because yes, abstinence leads to an increase in testosterone production, and then serum testosterone does go down after you have sex. That's just a physiological fact. Here's the deal though, just because you have an increase in testosterone production or a decrease doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a benefit or decrease in performance. And by performance, we're talking about power output. Mm-hmm. So there is not a link between sex and increase in hormones to like an increase in performance. And so one research group, they found peak serum testosterone levels appeared 7 days post-abstinence, and it rose to 145.7% of baseline serum testosterone levels. So you have a lot, by not having sex, your testosterone goes way up. That's all they studied. You would think that they'd be like, oh, well, how does that relate to performance? But that's not how scientific studies work. So another group, they did basically a giant review. That's what you hear like on meta-reviews or meta-analysis. And a group of Italian researchers, Italians, at the School of Sports Medicine from the University of Florence, they published this meta-analysis, and they concluded the present evidence suggests that sexual activity the day before competition does not exert any negative impact on performance. So now you have the decrease in testosterone and the increase in testosterone, and there's no link to performance from what the researchers have found. And you can look up that review article. It's in Frontiers of Physiology from June of 2016. So to answer your question, can having too much sex negatively impact your performance? I don't think so. And all the science hasn't found a link to it either. And then because you're asking the question, I would just say try it out and let us know what you find.
Be a study of N=1.
Yeah. Let us know how that goes for you.
All right. Number 42 comes from Sarah Hartung. She posted in our forum, and she is a training plan athlete, and she asks, can you talk about the range and types of athlete urine and blood testing, the availability, the costs, and ease of implementation from home testing to lab testing? Specifically, what the weekend warrior can use to their advantage versus what is out of reach or unnecessary from a cost or logistics perspective. I'm interested in hearing your perspective and experience related to what one might learn from these types of tests and how to take action on the results, whether it's related to supplement use, general nutrition, or especially recovery. How are these results or markers similar or different in male versus female athletes, and how do these results or markers fit into different periods of your training season or training plan?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. And we could do a whole podcast on this. But let's start with the complete blood count test. It's called a CBC. Your doctor will order it anytime they're like, WTF, what's going on? And basically, it's going to test for all sorts of values that you can measure in your blood. Your hematocrit, your iron, your ferritin, your leukocytes, for example, like a function of your immune system. You can measure cortisol, the stress hormone, and that's just getting started. That's a basic CBC. You can look at cholesterol, LDLs, HDLs. You can get insights to all sorts of different things. I mean, there's a whole division of medicine it's called hematology, and you can get your PhD in it. There's doctors that interpret this specifically. You can get insights into health and wellness, tons of stuff with this. But let's start with the CBC, and the regular CBC. It's like a preventative medicine, so you can get these regularly at your doctor's office, and most of the times, if you're healthy, your values are going to fall within the normal range. But your blood test will point out values that aren't within the normal range well before the physical symptoms begin to manifest. So that's why we call it preventative medicine. And for instance, like iron, oftentimes your iron or your ferritin levels will be much lower, and if you're testing them out, before you experience like a decrease in performance or symptoms, you have the opportunity to make a nutritional correction before that decrease in performance happens. And then, as a side note, in the World Tour, it's common that World Tour teams do regular testing of blood tests for their athletes just to stay on top of this, just to, it's again like that preventative medicine. And so the biggest thing that all the riders looked at was their hematocrit. Is it within normal ranges? Was it low? Was it high? And honestly, when I was on the national team and the vampires would come, the anti-doping, riders would have one hematocrit at the beginning of the stage race, and then 5 days later their hematocrit had gone down. So hematocrit will go down in the course of a stage race, and that I just thought that was interesting to see, because you get the results of the blood test right away. Oftentimes, I'm not kidding you, in one race in Italy, all of a sudden this motorcycle comes whizzing up to the car in the caravan, and they're like pointing at me and honking their horn. And so I roll down the window, and the dude on the motorcycle hands me a manila envelope, and it's the morning's blood test results. Freaked me out because I thought we were in trouble, but it just, I don't know, they just wanted to give it to us. But anyway, I digress. Getting back to, what it can do for you, I think the biggest thing to remember is you can go to the doctor and ask them for a blood test, and it's no more than a copay. Let's say your copay is $25 to $50. Your doctor will order up the test from the lab. You go, you give a blood sample, you wait, maybe technically the lab, it takes them 5 minutes. They put the sample in, it spits back out the results, but it may take a little bit longer for the doctor's office to get back to you. But I want you to remember that, because I think your question is coming from the rise and the prevalence of at-home testing. So you can order an at-home test. You can prick your finger. You can give a DNA sample. You can give a sample of blood. You can send it back in. They're going to run the same blood through the same machine as your doctor's office. They're going to give you back the results in an app or a report in an email, and add a bunch of features in it. But it's the same thing, same test, CBC, same science in everything. And so, but there's a big difference in cost versus going to the doctor's office. So I'll give you an example. So the recently FasCat athlete Phil Gaiman, he wanted to get some blood work done, just to stay on top of it. He's used to getting blood tests from the World Tour, and so he used one of the at-home tests. It's called Inside Tracker, and you can go to their website. like I did before this podcast, check them out. You can order up basically an at-home blood test. You can send in your sample, but it's $299.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's a power meter.
Yeah, that is a Stages, 105 power meter. And that's fairly pricey, but if cost is not your option and convenience is more what you're going for, maybe this is what, the route you go. But it's the same science, more or less the same results. Now, you can spend more money than $299 and you can get all sorts of other insights, because you can get pages and pages of data from a single blood sample test. But I'm a big fan of data and staying on top of your health with services and technologies like these. So if the cost is not a factor, and especially if the convenience is of not having to go to the doctor's office, you can check out something like Inside Tracker. I think there's a lot of other features that get you to be more aware of your wellness and health that would be of benefit there for not only you, but a lot of athletes out there.
I'll also add, just as a dietitian, and you asked about the differences between male and female. If you do struggle with fatigue, which a lot of athletes do, and that's a big sign that you could have an iron deficiency. Females are more prone to it because they have blood loss through menstruation, and not only that, but it's harder to meet their needs because their dietary intake and calorie need is lower. And then add on top of that, they might be vegan or vegetarian, and plant sources of iron are not as readily absorbed as animal-based sources. So sometimes that might mean you get that tested and you find that you're low, working with a dietitian to find dietary ways to increase your iron intake, and also just learning things like you shouldn't take an iron supplement with a big meal because there's compounds in the food, which is I could go into a whole tangent about that, but that can block the absorption. For example, a calcium supplement can interfere. So really just getting that education and tackling what's best. And then I'd mentioned too, some athletes, it can be really beneficial to do a electrolyte sweat test. And those are around $200. So if you have the money and you're really into being the best of the best, and that's something you could consider. And they are accurate, so that could be helpful.
The final thought I would say on that is, don't just get one test for curiosity's sake. Test regularly, like every 6 weeks. That's about the frequency I would recommend. That's the frequency at which if you make a nutritional intervention to increase your iron, for example, by taking an iron supplement or, altering your nutrition that way, you need to give it time. It's not like you flip a switch and you can take a test the next day and see a meaningful result. So maybe set, a good example is getting a blood test every 6 weeks or once every quarter, 4 times a year, that sort of thing.
Yeah, especially if you know that you're prone to having any deficiencies.
Or if you're like, wow, why does my performance suck? Because that's what would happen over in Europe. The riders, especially in the national team, U.S. national team, there was one famous director. If the riders started riding really poorly, he'd take you to the doctor and guaranteed their hematocrit is lower, and then he'd send you home. So it's kind of a sucky thing.
Yeah, real quick, I talked to one FasCat athlete who said they noticed their power kept dropping for no reason, and so because they saw that, they were very proactive and they went to the doctor, found out they had cancer, caught it early, was able to recover, and is now back on the bike and training again, which is just, it's awesome.
Holy cow.
Who would have known that, knowing
your power meter is so
it's good for him. He was treating his body like a Ferrari and went and got himself checked out.
That's why you go to the doctor.
Yeah. All right, number 44 comes from Jeff Pritchett. He posts in our forum and he says, "Hey there, I'm a 49-year-old former road racer, but I haven't been able to get fit for over 5 years. The stress of daily life just kills my recovery, and I've talked to other cyclists my age that have the same problem. How do I incorporate more stress reduction into my training program? How do I FTFP when I have so much external non-training stresses that I'm dealing with? If I try to FTFP, things fall apart because I am under-recovered."
So, Jeff, I think the first thing you got to take a look at is minimizing your stress. And it doesn't really have anything to do with your training plan. So, yoga, meditation. Jackson and I recorded a meditation for Cyclist podcast last summer. And Jackson even recorded a beginner-friendly guided meditation. 10 minutes you can listen to at the beginning of your bike ride. It's that intro to meditation. And so you can make meditation a part of your life daily. It only takes 5 minutes. And that could be the start of minimizing your stress. I'm not going to say it's going to, change your life, but that's the first place to start. And the second place to start would be, probably a reduction in training volume. Excuse me. That's what, tends to give athletes a lot of stress, is like what happens when they don't FTFP, what happens when they don't make it turn green. So if the training plan is causing you stress, back off, do less training, try to, get on a consistent path where you're turning it green every day versus, 50% of the time. And it really just gets back to that consistency. And once you get consistent 4 to 5 times a week, then you can get back on a plan. So you may need to just ride. Like, we had a lot of athletes in the past year with COVID and everything, just ride. Stay consistent, but just ride. Don't be following a training plan. And then this is what we've talked about in the podcast, is the soul ride. And the soul ride is when you're super stressed and life is overwhelming, but we all know a good bike ride is going to help. And that's going to actually help you reduce your stress. So it goes both ways. Bike rides decrease stress, but maybe not do any Tabata intervals or VO2s. Maybe just do a good endurance ride. Yeah,
for me, honestly, whenever I have a stressful week, just getting out early in the morning and get my happiness watts in. Sometimes I might go chase a Strava segment. I get a little bit of a adrenaline rush, and that helps me to maintain my stress throughout the day, or to not be overly stressed.
Yeah.
All right.
Last question.
Last one.
Woo!
Number 45 comes from Geraldine. She's one of Coach Allie's athletes, and she posts in the athlete forum. She asks, how do you develop a race strategy? I'm thinking big picture, the nitty-gritty details. That would be awesome. I'm particularly interested in cross racing, but I suspect there's a lot of crossover with other forms of racing. How do you choose times to, quote, recover? How do you decide the way that you'll stack the laps? How do you adapt your strategy when other racers try to wear you out? How do you try to choose when to try and burn the other racers out without doing yourself in?
Well, Geraldine, it sounds like we need to do a podcast on cyclocross race strategy.
I think so too.
Because you're Allie's athlete, we reached out to Allie, and she says, you want to know which races you'll be training through and which races you'll be feeling good for. You want to race hard each race, but tactically you'll want to be smart, especially for the races when you're on form. And Allie goes on to say, I learned from Tim Johnson when I was racing cyclocross that when you're resting in the race, and when you're on. So you use the downhill areas when you're not pedaling to catch your breath and get a drink, and then when you're going full throttle, you go for it, but you be wise. So you're not redlining the whole time. When Jeremy Powers came and did the Jeremy Powers cyclocross camp, we talked about parts of the course where you can rest, and then parts of the course that you plan on giving it your all. That's what Allie's talking about there. She says, when it comes down to how to ride your laps, know for certain the the first lap will be very hard. That's where we see the greatest power output. It's usually the shortest lap times. The following laps are about attrition. So however you need to ride, which should still be hard and steady, to either stay where you are and not go backwards, or not letting anyone come up from behind. Watch where the person in front of you struggles and attack them there. It's all about strategy. Speaking of strategy, when other racers are trying to ride you off their wheel, you have to set your own pace and know when you need to dig and when that digging will be too much. Vice versa, knowing your strengths in the race when you're trying to ride others off your wheel. Use your strengths wisely and settle back into a strong rhythm to make sure your efforts you put in are being put to good use. And I will give you an example of what Allie is talking about. If you are duking it out with a racer and you have 2 laps to go, and that racer has been just doing this one downhill section really well and gapping you off, and you have to catch back up. Well, here's what you can do. Get in front of them before that downhill section. This is called controlling the race, and you go down at your speed, and then it's up for that racer to either stay behind you or make a effort to go around you. And a lot of times that racer may make a mistake to go around you. But if you're coming up to a really curvy section of the race, make sure you lead into that section in the front, because you're controlling that rider behind you. And then you can keep the door closed on the inside of the turns, force that rider to, if they want to make a pass, they got to go on the outside. That's, again, called controlling the race. And on the other hand, this is another big thing. Through the start finish is often paved. That's where you can get a good draft. I always like to slide in behind the guys I'm duking it out with and get a draft there to catch my breath a teeny bit, knowing that they're working on the front. And then when you come to that first hard section, it's like, bam, get back on the gas and see if you can't throttle them a bit, knowing that you've just rested and they've just taken a big pull. So
that was a lot of questions.
That was 45 questions.
We didn't get to answer them all because we had so many.
Yes.
So many good ones too.
Yeah, so everyone, if you didn't hear your question answered, that is it. We're going to call it. That's 45. We've been podcasting for 2 hours. If you didn't hear your question answered, we're going to do a bonus podcast in the next couple of days, and we will answer everyone's question there, we promise. And so for the winner of the Normatec Pulse 2.0, Lacey, do you have an input? I have the answer already.
I'm torn. I really like the question about like the blood tests, and also the question about being in the back of the pack. I think a lot of our athletes can relate to that. Mm-hmm. And so it's up to you, Big Cat, but those are my 2 picks.
Yeah. Well, I think we're thinking along the same lines, because I like the blood test question. So, Sarah, you have won the Normatec Pulse. Congratulations. We will reach out to you afterwards for your address and ship those out to you. And then, I just want to really touch on the most thoughtful question, or what thoughtful is. We kind of mentioned at the beginning, it's thought-provoking. It's a question we think our listeners would enjoy hearing the answer from. It's not about like you, yourself, and I, and your unique question. That's, again, what we do as coaches. So if you're like, hey, I didn't hear my question, and you asked, I have this race coming up in so many weeks, so forth, maybe like reframe your question to for everyone, but we will try to answer it in the next couple of days.
And a lot of the questions too are things that we've answered before, so like they're definitely applicable and like helpful, but we want to answer the things that we haven't talked about before on the podcast. Yeah,
we've never talked about blood testing, and we've never talked about taking it. Well, I mean, we kind of have mentioned the tortoise and the hare, but I do think it's extremely beneficial for taking it slow and patient at these ultra events, because the media really only covers the front.
The fast people,
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of brave men and women that are racing, beating the clock, for example. Or, at the BWR, they just, that race was so hot.
Yeah, they go in, they set their own goals. I have an athlete that goes through that exact same situation often, and he loves to set his own goals, and like to be able to achieve those, it's really like it's a huge pat on the back for themselves, and they in their head that they won that race, and that's what's most important.
That's right. Yeah, you've won. And so I think that's it.
That is.
Yeah, so 2 hours, 10 minutes, 26 seconds.
Somebody commented it was a marathon podcast, and Allie says 2 hours of podcast equals 200 TSS.
Something like that.
It doesn't work like that, Allie. Didn't we just talk about that?
We did. But so again, congrats to Sarah. Look for the bonus podcast coming up, and remember to work hard, ride fast,
have fun,
and as always,
FTFP.
Thanks, y'all.